Thank you. And good evening to everyone. Thanks for coming on. I know, there's a lot happening, and I appreciate looking forward to going through hopefully it's a little journey together. The topic tonight is how to break through blockages to create internal change. Now, we all have certain things that we'd really want to achieve, things that we know are right, things that we know are it's not only selfishly something that I want to do, but also something that we know is the right thing to do, and it's something that would really be good. We're clear, we're sure this is right, but this is what I've got to do. But somehow, very often, it stays somewhere in the cloud and doesn't always actually come down to action, and doesn't come down to practical fruition. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to do it through the lens of a talk of the Rebbe, actually related to the concept of a Beit HaMikdash, of the temple, and the idea of what a temple's about. What are some of the biggest reasons why people don't get to actually accomplish goals that they know are right?
Lack of confidence.
So one is lack of confidence. Yes, the path of least resistance is doing nothing very often. Mm-hmm. That's true. That's a very true point. And unfortunately hurts a lot of people they don't get to do what they could have accomplished. Health, yeah. Well, sometimes people can't. That's right. And sometimes health is a reason why actually we can't get there. Right, that's true. So some wants are things that we have to put in the back burner sometimes legitimately. The Alter Rebbe says that wants, but even if we can't keep them, are still good to have. Visualizing something, even when you can't actually actualize it, there's still a benefit. And sometimes, even if you don't get there, visualizing itself has a certain, it sort of puts you somewhat there. Like the Alter Rebbe says about visualizing being a tzaddik, even if you're not, but just the visualizing helps us in the right direction. And the yearning for it. I want to address tonight mostly two, although there are many, but I want to address particularly two reasons why we don't always get to our goals. One is because we might be stuck in the big picture theory. I once read a essay written by a granddaughter who was very passionate about social activism, about making change. She had all these ideas and she was really passionate. And her grandmother seemed to her to be someone who was uncaring. Her grandmother was very matter of fact, certainly not woke. And, her grandmother seemed to be a little bit she felt lacking in empathy. And then what ended up happening is she was staying over at her grandmother's house. And her grandmother wasn't available one day. Her grandmother would normally go to volunteer in an old age home. And she had to go instead. And what happened is that she realized that, yes, she has all these theories about how she wants to change the world and improve the quality of life for elderly, and she had all different ideas. But when it actually came to feeding an old lady who was uncommunicative, who was drooling, who was, she didn't find it pleasant. So her grandmother did it every day, but she couldn't manage to do it just for one lunch. So sometimes the big picture theory sounds wonderful, but then when we actually have to move from this idea, I'm going to create a whole new paradigm for aged care. But then when that actually comes to feeding this this individual who needs help, but it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel particularly appetizing. It doesn't feel like she's actually accomplishing something major. So then suddenly she loses interest. So that's one reason that in theory it's great. You want to do something really massive, and then the actual day-to-day seems a little bit dry in comparison. Someone might have these ideas. A lady in my shiur was saying that she's got this idea that she wants to homeschool her kids, which is wonderful. She wants to really give them attention and individualized learning, and really wonderful. But when her kids come home at the end of the day, or on Sunday, or during lockdown, or for whatever reason, she often doesn't have the emotional energy or the time for them. So there's a bit of a disconnect sometimes between where we want to be in theory, and then actually the nitty-gritty is less glamorous. That's one reason. The other reason is that we might be too emotionally affected to actually do anything. What could happen is that something major happens. We're so shocked. We're so, whoa, how could this be, that we actually can't move forward and we can't actually do the necessary step. So if we give we might give an example that someone shares with us the news. It might be private, it might be something that's known around, about a major problem they're going through. And this is one of you, this might be someone in your immediate family or your best friend or whoever it is. But because you're so emotional and you care for them so much, that actually impedes you from being able to help, because you're just totally shaken up and not able to function anymore because of this news, and therefore you're not able to help them sometimes. So that's the other problem. One problem is where we're too stuck in the theory to do something practical. The other problem is we're very much down here, but we're so involved, we're so intensely involved, it's hurting us so much that we can't actually do anything practical. Now, okay, so let's look at the in the screen share. We've got the first section, when action doesn't meet one's goals. I've got two reasons. We just discussed why action might not align with our goals. Either we're staying too much in theory, or we're too emotionally involved to actually contribute. But then section B, Yosef and Binyamin's cry for their future. We'll start here. This will soon relate to the Beis HaMikdash as well, but we'll start here. There's a pasuk, and this is at a very powerful moment in the life of the Shvatim. Yosef had been away from his brothers for 22 years. I just heard before I came on that someone told me that they read that there was a lady in America who was unconscious for over 20 years, and she just woke up. Okay? So Yosef, he wasn't unconscious, but he was away from the family. He was a slave, and then he was in prison 22 years. And then he finally makes it out of prison, and he becomes the viceroy, the second in command in Egypt. And he meets he reveals his identity to his brothers. And this is what the pasuk says in it's text 1. I'll read it in Hebrew and English. Vayipel al tzavrei Binyamin achiv. He fell on his brother Benjamin's neck. Vayech, and he cried. O Binyamin bacha, and Benjamin wept. Binyamin cried al tzavarav, on his neck. So this is what you would imagine. The two brothers hadn't seen each other in 22 years. They finally know they're together, and they fall on each other's neck and they cry. Now, why are they crying? Why do you think they're crying?
Out of the emotion of being reunited.
Right. So simply, and of course, a big part of it is that they haven't seen each other in so long. Finally, they're together. They love each other. You know, Binyamin named all 10 of his children after Yosef. He didn't name one child after Yosef. He named all 10 of them after Yosef. One of them he named Chupim because I missed Yosef's wedding. He was sure because they'd been away for 22 years. One of them, he named another one Roshi, my head, because Yosef was like his head. He named all 10 of his children after Yosef. So they were really close, and now they're together. But there is more. See, Yosef had just urged his brothers, bring the whole family to Egypt and I'll take care of you. And although this was a happy moment, Yosef and Binyamin both realized, this is the beginning of exile. This is the beginning of Golus. Because now they're going into Egypt. There was a promise they would be in Egypt and they would be slaves there. Right now this feels good, but it's not going to stay good. And and this got them onto thinking about future Golus, future exiles, and future times that the Beit HaMikdash would be destroyed, because they're thinking about coming to Egypt, which is the beginning of exile. Furthermore, you know, when you have a really deep moment of connection, it's also a spiritual moment, right? A wedding is a spiritual moment. The connection of two souls is spiritual as well. And therefore, when Yosef and Binyamin come together with such power, that created a spiritual energy, and therefore was a moment where they could see with the Ruach HaKodesh, they had some level of prophecy or intuition, and they could see the future. And therefore the Gemara says, this text too is from the Gemara. It's also, Rashi says the same thing, and the Medrash says the same thing. It says, I'll read in Hebrew and English, that another reason why they were crying. Bacha, Yosef cried, al shnei mikdashim, on the two temples, the two Batei Mikdash. That would be in the future in Binyamin's portion in Israel. But in the future they would be destroyed. Uvinyamin bacha, Binyamin cried, al tzavarav, on Yosef's neck. Bacha al mishkan Shiloh. He was crying for the tabernacle in Shiloh. Shiloh is a city in Samaria. That was where there was a Mishkan for 369 years. And then that Mishkan was before the first temple, before the temple of King Solomon, of Shlomo. And that would also be destroyed. This would be in the portion in Israel of Yosef. And in the future it would be destroyed. Okay, so basically they both felt bad. They saw each other and they're thinking, Yosef says, my dear brother, I see in the future that the temple in your portion in Israel will be destroyed. And he cries. And Binyamin says, the Mishkan, the tabernacle in your portion, I see that too will be destroyed. And he cries as well. Now, I included over here a chart with the dates. The Exodus from Egypt, Yetziat Mitzrayim, was in the Jewish calendar 2448, right? So that's 3,332 years ago. So we're in the 3,333rd year now, 3333. It's pretty cool. Okay, the next year, 2449, was the year that the first Mishkan was built. The Jews had a Mishkan only while they were in the deserts, and that was built the next year, 2449. The Jews enter Israel after 40 years in 2488, and then they build a new Mishkan. This is not a temporary Mishkan that's going to go from place to place. This is going to stay in the same place for 14 years. It took 14 years for the Jews to conquer Eretz Yisrael and to divide up the land. I'm not sure what was harder. What was the harder part? You know, it says it took 7 years to conquer the land and another 7 years to divide up the land. It seemed like there was some I don't know, there must have been some land disputes or something. For some reason, it took 7 years to divide the land as well, just like it took 7 years to conquer it. But after 14 years, that was done. And then they built a permanent Mishkan in Shiloh. And there's excavations in Shiloh now. And hopefully, we'll be under more full Jewish control with time, and especially it's a perfect time for Mashiach. So in the year 2502 in the Jewish calendar, that's when Shiloh was built. Shiloh was a stone edifice. It wasn't some sort of wooden put together Mishkan. It wasn't temporary, and this was built to last. And indeed it did. It lasted for 369 years until there was a terrible battle, right? The last of the Shoftim, the last of the judges, his name was Eli. You may know Eli. Eli's possibly most famous for misreading Hannah, right? Hannah went to the Mishkan, the tabernacle, to pray. She was praying with a lot of emotion. She was whispering, and Eli thought she was a drunkard. We read this as the Haftarah on Rosh Hashanah. And he says, what are you doing? Coming to the Mishkan drunk? Just sober up and come back when you're ready. And she says, I'm not drunk. If I'm drunk, it's not of wine. I am in pain, and I'm praying with all my heart. I'm davening with all my heart to Hashem for a child. And then that in fact happened. So that Eli was the judge, the shofet of the Jewish people. At the end of his life, he was 98 years old. There was a terrible battle with the Plishtim, and his two sons get killed. The Aron, the holy Aron, gets captured. The Mishkan gets destroyed, and Eli hears all the news and is in shock. He falls off his chair and dies. Terrible. After that Mishkan was destroyed, there was a new Mishkan built in Nov, another city. But that Mishkan didn't last. What happened was the Nov was a city of Kohanim. There were some cities that were cities of Levites. There were cities of Kohanim. This was a city of Kohanim. And when King David was running away from Shaul, who was jealous of his popularity, so the Kohanim in Nov helped him, and then Shaul destroyed that much of that city and the Mishkan, and then it moved to Givon. Then we have Givon. It stayed there until the first temple was built, till the first Beis Hamikdash was built in 2928. That lasted 410 years, the first Beit HaMikdash. Then it was destroyed. 70 years later, the second Beis HaMikdash was built. That lasted 420 years. And then that was unfortunately destroyed. So that's the timeline. I've got a little map of Eretz Yisrael here. And you see that there's Yehuda. Then on top of Yehuda is Binyamin. Binyamin's a small area, but it includes Yerushalayim. And then on the border actually between Binyamin and Yehuda is Yerushalayim. Then on top of Binyamin is Ephraim and then Menashe. Ephraim and Menashe are both part of the tribe of Yosef. So Yosef had a big area there, and the Mishkan was in the tribe of Yosef. Shiloh was in Ephraim, and some of the other ones were in Menashe's portion, I believe. Okay. So this is why they were crying. They were crying also because of the lost Beit HaMikdash and the lost Mishkan. Let me ask you two questions, and these two questions will give us the two answers why the Beit, to do with how to deal with blockages. First of all, why specifically the neck? Okay, does anyone get neck aches? Sitting too often in front of a Zoom, in front of a computer screen, watching Zoom nowadays. Well, there's great spiritual significance with neck aches. Oh, yes. My daughter's listening, and she says sometimes when she reads a lot, she hurts her neck. So why specifically the neck? It says that Yosef cried on Binyamin's neck. Binyamin cries on Yosef's neck as well. Why specifically the neck? What's the meaning of the neck? The second question that we want to deal with is, what about their own Mishkan, their own Beit HaMikdash? It's all very nice that Yosef cares about Binyamin's Beit HaMikdash getting destroyed, but doesn't he care about his own Mishkan getting destroyed? And same thing the other way around. Doesn't Binyamin care about his own Beit HaMikdash getting destroyed? Why do they only cry for each other, not for themselves? Right? You know the lovely story about the two brothers, the one brother who was rich with no children, the other with lots of children but very poor, and they both give each other they both come over the hill to give each other their bundle of wheat. Yeah, you know that story?
Yeah.
I just thought I'm just mentioning it because it relates, but also because what people might not be aware is that the only source we have for that story right now, as far as I know, is the Quran. So it's apparently a Jewish story, but we don't have. It's possible that there was a medrash that got lost. Certainly, he was told, different ideas from Torah which he incorporated, but we don't have it in Jewish tradition. So I just see people quoting that story a lot regarding this type of idea. I've seen it quoted I've seen, I'm not going to say who, but a certain leading rabbi, a chief rabbi, was speaking with the prime minister or president at a big event, and he quoted the story as the Talmud says. I haven't learned the whole Talmud, but I don't believe that that's accurate. Anyway, but either way, why don't they care for their own Mishkan or Mikdash? Why are they just crying for each other's and not for their own? Actually, asking someone to saying, yeah, well, they were really selfless. That's a big ask, and that's even more than the Torah really demands. Right? What's the golden rule, one of the most famous psukim, the most famous verses in the Torah, this is text 3, is V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your fellow like yourself. So in other words, the Torah does not expect you to love someone more than yourself. That's too much of an ask, and it might not even be appropriate. Love your fellow like yourself. This is actually brought as the halacha. The Gemara in Nedarim says, I'll read it's in Hebrew and English in text 4. The Gemara says, what do you do if you have mayan shel bnei ha'ir? In the case of a spring belonging to the residents of the city, right? So, chayehen v'chayei acherim. And if the water was needed for their own lives, i.e. the city's residents required the spring for drinking water, and it was also needed for the lives of others. So who should they give the spring to? Themselves or others? So you would think, do the nice thing, give it to others. You'd think that's at least what the Gemara would try to encourage us. It says no. It says that chayein kaid min l'chayei acherim. Their own lives take precedence over the lives of others. The same thing with their animals, or the next town down the river's animals. Again, their animals come first. And the same thing even for their laundry. Their laundry comes first. So we see this concept that, yes, you're meant to love others, and it's very important. Avas Yisrael, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, but it doesn't mean that you should forget about yourself. You have to put on your mask before helping others. So why didn't they cry for their own temple as well? Why only for their brother's temple? I have another question. Yeah, okay. So, let's go back to the first question. So, what is special about the neck, and what's the meaning of the neck? The Medrash says simply the idea of a neck, I'm not going to read it inside, this is text 5, is that it's high up in the body. Just as the neck is high up in the body, the temple, the Beit HaMikdash, is high up, is on a mountain. Okay, very nice. But still, that is tall really that important? My mother's a really wonderful lady, not particularly tall. Anyway, if tall, so obviously the answer is we don't mean just physically tall, we mean spiritually tall. When we say the Beit HaMikdash is like the neck because it's high up, it doesn't just mean it was on a mountain, it means it's spiritually high. Okay, good. So then call the Beit HaMikdash the head. Why are we talking about the Beit HaMikdash as the neck, which is pretty high, but not quite there? Say they cried on each other's heads because they were thinking about each other's temples. Okay, so this is now text 6. This is from Rashi. Rashi says, I'll just maybe read it in English only. This is in the blessings that Moshe gave to the Jewish people at the end of his life. And Rashi says that it explains the blessing and dwells between his shoulders. What does it mean between the shoulders? What's the blessing? The holy temple was built on the highest point of Binyamin's land, except that it was 23 cubits below the Eitam well. Now, it was King David's intention to build it there at the level of the Eitam well, as it is taught in Shchitat Kedoshim. However, they said to King David, let us build it a little lower, for scripture states, and he dwells between the shoulders, which are lower than the head. There's no part of an ox more beautiful than its shoulders. Okay, so what have we said here so far? We've said that the neck or the shoulders is actually better than the head. It's in some way more beautiful. Now, I don't think the whole meaning of this Rashi is some sort of, is just about, I don't know, beauty, necklace. It's something more. Let me give you an example to understand what exactly is special about the neck. This is from American politics or Australian, but it could be used about Australian politics as well. When we think of Australia, what do we think about? Which landmarks or which cities, places? I don't know. Might think Melbourne, Sydney, that's like 3/4 of Australia. And then there's a little bit of other stuff in the last little bit, right? If you add a few more cities, you might add, okay, Melbourne, Sydney, Canberra, Perth, Brisbane, done. What about the middle? The middle is only useful as somewhere to fly over when you're crossing Australia. It has no inherent use. It's a waste of space. So actually, a lot of people who live in the middle don't like that idea. In America, it's called flyover country, and a lot of people in the middle don't like being referred to that way. The neck is also a flyover country. You have the head, which is very important. You have the heart, the heart is very important. And then what's in the middle? The neck is just this little highway so that the head can get the fresh blood it needs, the body can receive its instructions, and boom, 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 the neck is nothing. But that is the whole specialty of the neck. The neck is about the neck is about the ability to bring the passion and the ideas and the vision of the head to the body. In other words, to make it practical. If the head is the mad scientist or the absent-minded professor, the neck is integrated spirituality. It's when your passions and your ideas become practical. That's the idea of the neck. That is also the purpose of the Beit HaMikdash. The Beit HaMikdash was not made in order to, I don't know, to get away from regular life and to hide out on some mountaintop. That's not what it's for. The Beit HaMikdash is a place where you come and infuse holiness into your regular life. There's a song about three people on a plane. There's probably similar jokes about this, but you have three people on a plane. You have a Jew, a Christian, and a Muslim, and they're on their way. They're just culturally, they're not religious. They're on their way to the atheist convention in LA. If anyone knows the song, but they're on their way to the atheist convention, and then suddenly the plane loses an engine. They get a bit worried, and then it loses the second engine. And now all three of them are suddenly praying. They're all praying. And then what happens? There's some miraculous landing. It lands. No one gets hurt. Everyone's fine. And the Christian becomes a priest. The Muslim becomes an imam. And the Jew is still the same. Before this, he was a gardener and is still a gardener. But now he's infusing his work life, his family life, his pastimes are all infused with meaning. Right? Now he's doing it all within a Torah and mitzvot context and living his life that way. So we don't, in Judaism, the Beit HaMikdash is not to get away from the world. It's in order to bring light into the world. And that's why it is represented by the neck, not the head, because the head means sort of abstract, staying away from regular life. Whereas the neck is when you bring it into regular life, where it actually makes a difference practically. And that's our first message to people who feel that the theory is more flashy, more glamorous, it's more exciting than actually feeding the individual who's just non-communicative and drooling. But this is practical chesed. This is actual. Or meditating on liberation versus eating the actual piece of matzah. That's the difference. That's the neck. Okay, so in the Beit HaMikdash, as we say in text 7, it says that the windows were made, and he made for the house, windows broad without and narrow within. The Beit HaMikdash windows let light out rather than bringing light in. The windows were shaped such that it was narrow on the inside, broad on the outside, so that light could go out, meaning this is not about staying away and isolating. This is about shining, radiating, and improving the world. Okay. Now, we know that Aristotle was a great thinker, great philosopher. And there's a story told. I tried a little bit. I didn't spend a lot of time, but I did spend a little bit of time trying to find if this story was told in official books of history or websites of history of Aristotle. I didn't find it yet, but if someone finds it later, maybe tell me. But there's a story when one of his students visited him unexpectedly, and the student sees him in the middle of being engaged in an immoral act. And the student is very surprised. This is the great philosopher. This is the one who gives classes and exhorts everyone else on how to live a moral life. And now he's doing this. He said, Aristotle, what's going on? So Aristotle responds, now I'm not Aristotle. In other words, I can give a class on how to live a moral life, but right now, this is my private life. It has nothing to do with my classes, right? Torah is not like that. Torah is not wisdom that stays in the head. Torah is the neck, where it has to come down from the head to the body. That's why the word Torah itself means guidance. And we've got a famous quote from Pirkei Avot that Lo Medrash Shikar, the main thing is not the ideas, Ela HaMaisa, rather it is the action, which is the main thing. Okay, let's now move on to where, so now we understand why they cried on the neck, not on the head, right? The head, first of all, didn't need any help. The head stays whole even when there's a problem. In other words, let's say someone's involved in bad things. Is their soul, the essence of their soul, still pure? Yeah. Their soul is fine. It's not being expressed. So their head representing their deepest, highest point is still great. The problem is only their neck and down. And so that's why they didn't cry in each other's head, because the essence of the temple was not actually destroyed. It's, in other words, the essence, there's still God after the temple. So in other words, the essence is still there. It's how it manifests in the world, which is the neck that got destroyed. Furthermore, the neck actually matters more than the head. Your ideas matter less than what you actually do with them, right? One good idea actualized is it helps the world more than a few that stayed where they are. Someone once came past the Rebbe, and the Rebbe continued a conversation that they had spoken for 15 seconds, like 30 years ago, and the Rebbe continued the conversation. And the fellow says, "Wow, Rabbi, you're amazing." And the Rebbe responded, "What does it help the world if I'm amazing?" Right? It doesn't really matter if I'm amazing or not. What matters is, what can we actually do practically? Let's continue the practical conversation. So that is the neck.
Can I add something to that for a second?
Sure.
Am I allowed to interrupt you?
Yeah, go for it.
The neck, the back of the spinal cord connects to the brain stem, and that controls our nervous system and so many parts of our body. And without that part of the neck, we can't function as full human beings. So maybe that is the significance of the neck.
Nice. That is nice. And that the spine is actually very much a good imagery for what we're saying as well, because it goes up into the head and down all the way down the spine. So it's that idea of linking, the head with the torso. Yeah. So thank you. Now, trivia piece. Who cries the most times in Tanakh? Who cries the most times in Tanakh? So it's actually Yosef. Yosef cries. I mean, we're running short of time, but he cries many, many times. Anyway, but one of the times he cries, we said already, when he cries over over Binyamin's neck. Another time that he cries is when he sees his father, and he cries over his father's neck as well. And there too, we find something interesting. We find that Yosef cries for his father, but not for himself. We'll read first the story, text 9. It says, "Vayesa Yosef merkavta," that Yosef harnessed his chariot, "Vayal likras Yosef Yisrael aviv," and he went up to meet Israel, his father. Yaakov was also called Israel, Yisrael, Goshen to Goshen. Vayira love, he appeared to him. Vayival tzavarav, he fell on his neck. Vayevchal tzavarav oid, he cried on his neck for a long time. So he cries on his neck. This is another incident of him crying. And it's interesting that yet that while Yosef is crying, what is Yaakov doing? What's Yaakov doing? Yaakov says Shema. Okay? Right at the first time he's meeting his son after 22 years, he finds the time to, now he's going to say Shema. It's interesting. Imagine that. And it's quite surprising. You couldn't have said Shema 5 minutes ago before Yosef came? Or in 5 minutes? So Yaakov uses this opportunity, this time of great emotion. He doesn't cry on Yosef's neck. He doesn't kiss him. He says Shema. And the question is, why is Yaakov saying Shema? Why doesn't he cry when he sees his son for the first time? So we see text 11, I just paraphrased from Zohar. Yosef was crying about the Beis HaMikdash that would be destroyed. So why doesn't Yaakov cry about the Beis Hamikdash that would be destroyed? Well, let's think. Why do we cry all together? So psychologists and thinkers of different disciplines and scientists, they talk about this and try to come up with different answers. As a baby, crying clearly helps, because when the baby's hungry, if it wouldn't cry, then it wouldn't get the food it needed, or wouldn't get the changed nappy, or the whatever it needs, the burping. It needs to cry to get attention. And maybe we realize after a while that crying helps us. That's what some suggest. It also, even as adults, what some suggest that it helps others realize that we need support. We might not need something to eat now as an adult, but we need support in other ways. So it alerts others that we need support. There's a whole lot of reasons people suggest, like scientifically, why we cry. It's interesting that probably the first source about the emotional benefit of crying is in the Torah. The Torah, it says in Tehillim, and this is also an Avram Fried song, but Haisa li dimasi lechem yomam v'layla. My tears, King David says, David HaMelech says, my tears were my bread day and night. Be'emar elai ko hayom. When they said to me all day, people would torment David, and they would say to him, Aye Elokecha, where is your God? You're a believer, so why do you have so many problems? Why is your life so upside down? Okay, David spent his early life. He was outcast within his family. Then he moved on to facing off against a giant Goliath. Then he continued on to being hounded by his father-in-law, King Shaul. He had to escape to the enemies, to the different enemy nations around. Then his son rebels. His other son, has very terrible incidents within the family, full of problems. And he says that my tears were my bread. In other words, that the tears made him feel better emotionally. They gave him strength. They satiated him. So that is so we see there is a benefit in crying. But although there's a benefit, it helps us. It helps us emotionally. But there's also a issue if it stays with that. I'll give you an example. Let's say we hear about someone who's in trouble, and we have the ability to help them. We might say, "Oh, that's so sad. I feel so sad for them," and then we feel like we've done enough. I've already said that I feel bad. Now it's all good. And actually, because of my show of empathy, which is genuine empathy, I don't do anything. Or someone might tell me, you know what? You've really got to improve in a particular area, in Torah mitzvot, in personal growth, in how I serve Hashem, in my midat, whatever the case is. And I say, you're right. Oh, it's really bad. And then after that, how do I feel? I've done my piece. I've showed that I'm upset. That's good enough. And therefore, I don't end up doing anything. And therefore, we have the powerful Yom Yom, which is the daily thought of the day that the Rebbe wrote as a sort of a mini calendar. And one entry for the 8th day of Adar Sheni is Tova Pu'ula Achas Me'elef Anachas. A single act is better than 1,000 groans. So we feel bad, we groan. That's lovely, but what are you going to do about it? And this explains why Yosef cried only for Binyamin. Binyamin cried only for Yosef. Yosef cried for Yaakov, but Yaakov didn't cry for himself. You know why? Because when it's something within our area, something that is our issue, something that we can take care of, something Hashem gave to us, then we've got to fix it. It's not enough to feel bad. Binyamin said, I'm not going to cry for the Beit HaMikdash that is going to be destroyed. I'm going to stop it from being destroyed. Yosef as much as he cares, he can't stop it because it's out of his zone, out of his capacity. He tries as much as he can. He helps Binyamin, but ultimately only Binyamin can make that change. And therefore Binyamin doesn't cry because he's busy working. Yaakov too doesn't cry because he's busy working. How does he work? He says Shema. So I'm slightly over time. I don't want to continue drag it much longer, but I'll just share something that really inspired me personally. My grandfather survived 7 concentration camps. He was at 17. He was the only member of his immediate family. He lost his parents, his siblings, his one set of grandparents, a lot of others, uncles, aunts, cousins. And he was there in a hospital, and he borrowed, there was a rabbi there, famous rabbi, Rabbi Herschel Schachter. He borrows his tefillin, and then he says, I'm not going to waste my life in a hospital. He jumped out, and he got onto a train. He didn't have it was, I think, an army train. He didn't get on. He didn't have a ticket, but they let him lie down on top of the train. And he went from Germany back to Slovakia. And then he straight away, he wanted to get on with his life. He was helping people. Unfortunately, there were a lot of people to bury. He started a business. He was looking for his family. But the point was, and we see this with anyone, many of us have Holocaust survivors in our family, that they thought, what can I do to make a positive difference? They didn't spend their life wallowing in self-pity, even though they had nightmares and it was terrible tragedies. But they thought, what can I be doing right now in order to bring light to the world? And that's something that really inspired me. It was always there in the background, but at the same time, he was always positive, happy, and doing. And that is the message of Yosef not crying on his own neck, not crying for his own Mishkan. He says, my Mishkan, I'm going to fix it up. I'm not going to just feel bad, have sympathy for it getting destroyed. I'm going to make sure that it doesn't get destroyed. So what's the take-home message? 2 points. Number 1 is, remember the message of the neck. The Beit HaMikdash is the neck. Make sure our ideas are integrated with our regular life. Lesson number 2, we don't cry for our own Beit HaMikdash, only for if we can't help in another situation. Because for our own Beit HaMikdash, we've got to make sure that it is very soon rebuilt, and hopefully with getting through these 2 blockages, not staying in our head and not getting too shaken to be able to act, we'll do that last mitzvah to bring it right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was really, really inspirational. Thank you very much, Rabbi Shmerling.
You're welcome.
Maybe if anyone has any questions, would anyone have any questions or comments or anything? Miriam? Was that your speaker on? No?
No.
Okay. I just removed. All right. Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
And you've definitely given us chizuk in the 9 days to try to make things tangible and, to remove all blockages and hopefully to bring all of our aspirations and everything down to earth.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Have a good night. Thank you so much.
Good news also, as we said at the beginning, for Yeshua Binyamin ben Rivka.
Amen. Amen. Complete refuah shalema.